Last week we took a break from creation, but this week we find ourselves diving back into the creation story. And usually I like to start with a funny clip to wake you up, but this week I have so much to cover that we only have time for a very quick one. So here you go. That certainly was fast. And today we've got to move just as fast as that pig did. Now, when we last left off, we were at the end of day 6. God had just created man and woman in his image, and then he gives them this command, Genesis 1:28. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit in it, with seed in it. They will be yours for food." Did you notice what isn't listed as food? The animals. Animals weren't killed until after Adam and Eve sinned, and God makes clothes for them out of the animal skins. You see, bloodshed only came into this world with sin itself, including the bloodshed of animals. Verse 30. "And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has a breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. Ooh, it's not just good, it's very good this time. Why? Well, because man had finally been introduced to what God was creating for him. Now, every little living thing on the earth has been made. Every species has been created. And here is where a line in the sand is drawn. And you have to decide where you stand. Do you believe in the Bible story of creation or in man's story of evolution? You see, you must decide where you stand when it comes to creation. You can't have it both ways. It is either creation or evolution. They are not compatible. If it's evolution, then you are standing with being grounded in the assumption that life on earth was created over billions of years. This is nothing like the 6-day creation story that we have in Scripture. So if you are like me and you believe in the literal 6-day creation story, because that is what the Bible says, then you are grounded in the assumption that the earth is so much younger than that. But once again, I don't want you to think that this is a battle of science against religion. That's not the situation. It is instead a battle of religion against religion and science against science. But wait, hasn't science proven that the earth is billions of years old? Not at all. There is a larger quantity of evidence for the earth being only thousands of years old than there is for it being billions of years old. Check it out.
Radiometric dating is probably the key that is used to try to determine a billions of years history of Earth's past. But if we were to look at all of the dating methods as a whole, as a collective, you say that the majority?
Yes, it's, one of my colleagues, Dr. Russ Humphreys, once sat down and collated all the different methods that have been used, and he found that over 90% of them gave a young age for the Earth.
Okay. Let's touch on several issues very quickly. Let's talk about Earth's geomagnetic field.
Yes, the Earth has a magnetic field. That's why a compass points north. It's generated by electrical currents inside the Earth in its core, and it's been discovered, there's actually historical measurements around the globe, that the strength of the Earth's magnetic field has been decaying with time.
Okay.
And if we project that backwards, okay, it's an assumption, but it's a reasonable assumption, and it's a whole Earth process. If we project that back in time, the Earth's magnetic field would have been stronger and stronger and stronger back in the past.
Makes sense.
But it gets to the point where it's so strong, it'd be that of a magnetic star, which life wouldn't exist on. So there is an upper limit to how far you can stretch it back. And some say only as little as 10,000 years, and the Earth would be as strong as a magnetic star. So that seems to limit the upper limit for the age of the Earth.
Okay.
Now, we don't have time to go through all of the different ones, but let me toss some of them out there at you real quickly. First of all, the amount of salt in the ocean is evidence for a young Earth. You see, we can measure the amount of salt in the rivers that is being washed into the oceans. If the sea was billions of years old, like it needs to be for evolution, then the salt content of the ocean would be so high that no life could survive in it. You see, if we stick with the sea, there's another evidence for young Earth, and that's the amount of sediment on the seafloor. Similarly, to the salt, every year the combination of water and wind causes the erosion of 20 billion tons of dirt and rock, and then it deposits them on the seafloor. But the average thickness of the seafloor all over the globe is only 1,300 feet. If you do the math, there should be at least 250 times as much sediment on the seafloor if the ocean was billions and billions of years old. And we could keep going. For example, if we had more time, I could tell you how we have measured the increase in the temperatures of the sun because of its thermonuclear conversion and its theoretical change in composition at its core. And how if we then worked that number backwards, the entire Earth would have been below freezing billions of years ago, which means life would have never had the chance to get started. I could talk to you about how the layers of stone in the Grand Canyon, which are supposed to be millions of years apart from each other, lay on top of each other. But instead of them having breaks, they have bends in them, which shows that they must have been formed around the same time and been pliable when bent by something like a global flood. I could talk to you about the fact that since helium is the second lightest element and is a noble gas, all helium should have leaked out of old rocks in less than 100,000 years. But it is still present in huge quantities. Or I could talk to you about how radiometric dating, which is supposed to be evolutionists' go-to proof for an old Earth, it doesn't work very well because carbon-14, which has a half-life of only 5,730 years, which means it shouldn't be present in any fossils, which are supposedly hundreds of millions of years old. But we find it. And when evolutionists were dating fossils, they would never use carbon-14 as a dating source because it shouldn't be present. Yet, it has shown up over and over and over again in fossil after fossil. You cannot ignore the scientific evidences, or I guess you can. Let me read you a quote from an article found in the American Biology Teacher when addressing this known scientific fact that carbon-14 is found in things that are supposed to be so old it shouldn't be there. Here's a quote. Mesozoic bone consistently yields a falsely young radiocarbon date of a few thousand to a few tens of thousands of years, despite the fact that it is millions of years old. Do you get that quote? Do you understand what's wrong with that? Because here is the problem. When you are starting with the assumption that the Earth is billions of years old and the things that you are looking at are millions of years old, then when evidences come before you which show otherwise, you just throw them out because they don't work with your assumptions. That's not the way that science is supposed to work. In the light of new evidences, those assumptions are supposed to change, but that's not the reality of the situation. And there honestly is no greater example of this than back in 2005 when Mary Schweitzer accidentally came across something when they used a solution to eat away all the minerals which contained a fossil. You see, they put them in acid, and the acid eats away the rocks, and you can then more easily see the fossilized bone. The problem was that they left it in the solution for too long, and since the fossil had exchanged its living cells for minerals, there shouldn't be anything left at all to examine. Watch this.
What happened next happened by mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was, and it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No. She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what? You say,
I didn't want to tell anybody.
You'd be ridiculed,
yes.
Right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels. And, I was like shocked. I mean,
how could that be?
How could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones.
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seem to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science, that organic material can't possibly survive even 1,000,000 years, let alone 68 million. Mary, Jack, and their team published their B-Rex findings in a series of papers in the journal Science and were promptly attacked. Critics said their samples might have been contaminated, or that the supposed blood vessels were actually something called biofilm, a type of slime. But as Mary showed us, she's been able to replicate her findings. These are pieces of an even older dinosaur, a well-preserved 80-million-year-old duckbill. When she dissolved it away in acid...
Let's put this under the scope here.
Well, look.
Is that a blood vessel?
This is a blood vessel.
You're
You
kidding.
see the branches right there? And look at all of them. And it's so consistent over and over and over again. We do this bone and it comes out and I get excited every time. I can't help it. I mean, 80 million years old.
Mary published her new results last year, and while some of her critics have been swayed, the controversy still rages, and the stakes are high. If blood vessels can survive 80 million years, what about DNA?
Tissue that could be manipulated. The obvious conclusion is this fossil cannot be millions and millions of years old, because it can take just a few weeks for living tissue to become eradicated, let alone millions of years. This experiment has been replicated time and time again, and we have found blood vessels, cells, tissue, and so much more. After seeing this evidence, the logical conclusion is to rethink the date of dinosaurs. That's the first thing that should come into your mind. I mean, how can you not think that in light of this science? But what conclusion did Dr. Schweitzer come to? Well, she wrote, the obvious question, though, was how soft, pliable tissue could survive for hundreds of millions of years. You see, assumptions will cause you to ignore science, and that is so sad. Okay, so before I run out of time, we better get moving. If we were to take a young Earth stance based on the Bible, then that would mean that dinosaurs would be on Earth the same times as man, not millions of years before. It would also mean that people in the Bible times probably would have even seen or interacted with dinosaurs in some way before they became extinct. So then you ask yourself, are there any places where dinosaurs are talked about in the Bible? And now here's the thing, the term dinosaur wasn't actually coined until people started digging them up and trying to piece them back together. That was in about 1842. So the term dinosaur has only been around for 182 years. That means when you look in the Bible, you aren't looking for the word dinosaur, you're looking for something described that sounds like a dinosaur. The first place that we see one mentioned is in Job. In this section of Job, God is responding to Job's complaints by talking about all the amazing things that he has made, which Job can see with his own eyes. So God is talking about things that Job has seen or can see on the earth at that time. Let me read you Job chapter 40, verse 15. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins. What power is in the muscle of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. Verse 19, it ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. The hills bring it their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. Oh wow, we have an animal described that has a huge, strong limbs, can live in the water, and has a tail like a cedar, which were the largest known trees back then. What does that sound like? Is there any animal today on the earth that would fit this description? Absolutely not. It really sounds like a brachiosaurus or something similar. Interesting, huh? Now let's look at another one mentioned in Job chapter 41. Job 41. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Oh, wow. So we've got some kind of beast that lives in the water. And initially you might be thinking alligator, but no, that is not an alligator when you keep on reading. Verse 9. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Ooh. Now remember that God is describing how powerful he is by using an animal that everyone would be familiar with. It wouldn't make sense for him to describe something that they had never seen. So this thing that he is describing has thick, overlapping scales that nothing can get through. And if your mind wasn't blown away yet, check this out. Verse 18. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as if from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze and flames dart from its mouth. What are we talking about now? It sounds like a fire-breathing dragon. Yes, a dragon. Some sort of water dragon. Dragons weren't real, were they? Well, what is a dragon but a dinosaur that can breathe some fire? Breathe some fire? Really? What do you mean, really? We have lightning bugs who make their butts glow. We have snakes that can shoot venom out of their teeth. We have lizards that shoot streams of poisonous blood from their eyes. And eels that can make electricity. Does fire really seem that far-fetched? No, absolutely not. The Leviathan is described here, but it's also mentioned in passing in Psalm 74:13, Isaiah 27:1, Psalm 104:25. This thing had to exist alongside of man in order for the Bible to write about it, expecting people to know what it was talking about. And you know what? The Bible isn't the only historical document which writes about dinosaurs and man. There are quite a few historical documents that talk about them. For example, have you ever heard of Herodotus? Herodotus was an ancient Greek writer. He has been called the father of history because he was the first historian we know who collected his materials systematically and then tested them for accuracy. He didn't want to write down stories. He wanted to write down truths. He wanted to record history. Herodotus is talked all about in school history classes and is studied today, and the things that he recorded are believed to be factual. Well, all but one writing. But one writing. Listen to what he records in his records known as the Histories. He writes, "There's a place in Arabia, which is modern Egypt, situated very near the city of Buto, to which I went, on hearing of some winged serpents. And when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of the water snake, but he has wings without feathers, just like the wings of a bat." Do you get this? The father of history, whose writings are considered to be historical fact, in his historical records, wrote about having seen with his own eyes something that sounds like it came from the pterosaur family. And he's not the only one who recorded this. Another historian, this time a Roman historian, Cassius Dio, recounted of how a Roman army once killed a dragon. He wrote, "One day, when Regulus, a Roman consul, was fighting against Carthage, a dragon suddenly crept up and settled behind the wall of the Roman army. The Romans killed it by order of Regulus, skinned it, and sent the hide to the Roman Senate." Dio says that when the dragon's hide was measured by order of the Senate, it happened to be amazingly 120 feet long, and the thickness was fitting to the length. A hide from a 120-foot-long dragon recorded in historical documents. There are all kinds of evidences in history. Let me show you some pictures real quickly, okay? Now, remember that people didn't start digging up dinosaurs and figuring out what they looked like until 1842. However, Prior to this time, all over the globe, people were accurately depicting these animals. There are only two ways that they could possibly have known what dinosaurs look like. The first is to dig them up and try to piece them back together. The other is to have seen them with their own eyes. Yes, Bishop Richard Bell, he died in 1496, and as was the custom at the time, he was buried under the floor of the church in Carlisle, England. He was buried in a brass tomb set in a stone floor, and there is a small decorative brass piece which runs around this tomb. Carved into this brass piece is the picture of an eel, 3 dogs, a bird, a pig, a bat, a fox, a dolphin, a bear, and 4 fish, all very real creatures. Oh yes, and this. Clearly 2 sauropods, one with spikes on its tail. The problem is, there were no sauropods with spikes on its tail. That is, until it was discovered in 1989. Yes, on this you have 2 dinosaurs accurately carved, one of them not even discovered in the fossil record until 500 years later. Folks, if dinosaurs weren't dug up and pieced back together until the 1800s, then if we have accurate representations of them before that time, what is the logical conclusion about how they came to fashion them? Take a look at these Inca burial stones, which were found in Peru and date from the year 500 to 1500. Almost looks identical to a Triceratops. This one looks just like a T-Rex. This one looks just like a Stegosaurus. Do we really think that the Incas searched for, found, dug up, and accurately pieced back together 3 different dinosaurs? This picture is of clay figures found in Mexico, which date from 800 BC to 200 AD. They look very similar to the Brachiosaurus. In 1879, this picture was found carved into the wall of the Grand Canyon. It was carved sometime before that by an Indian tribe, and it looks just like an Edmontosaurus. This picture was found in Colorado, also carved by an Indian tribe. They carved themselves hunting a Triceratops. This one is from an ancient temple in Cambodia. Another great example of a spiked dinosaur from a completely different part of the world. This next one was found in an old cave in Ecuador. Folks, there are so many more of these that I could show you from all around the globe. Some of the same dinosaurs were drawn centuries apart from nations which had no contact with one another. Now, once again, you either believe that people have been searching for these, then scientifically digging up bones, and then piecing them back together to accurately then portray dinosaurs all over the globe, or people actually had to see them with their own eyes. Will this ever be enough evidence to convince someone who starts with an assumption that God isn't real? I think we established that fact early in this sermon. Some assumptions are so deep-rooted that a dinosaur could walk past them and they would still explain it away. But as a Christian, I want you to know that you are not asked to believe in something that isn't backed up by science. We have evidences for a young earth, verses about dinosaurs in the Bible, blood and tissues from dinosaurs, carbon dating evidence, historical writings about them, and so many archaeological finds that the evidences for them are astounding. You have good reasons to believe in the credibility of the creation story happening exactly how the Bible says it happened. And once again, the Bible is shown to be a trustworthy, holy, inspired, infallible book from the hands of God Himself. How lucky we are to have it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless. Hope to see you soon.